Hey, Jeff Cohn here, host of the Team Building Podcast, where we interview top team leaders, broker owners, thought leaders across the country. I have a very special guest on the show today, our very own Kevin McGowan, the CEO of Elite Real Estate Systems. You guys have heard of that company before, and we are excited to get into the nuts and bolts of key performance indicators, accountability, gecko boards, and so much more. Kevin, welcome to the podcast today.
Hey, Jeff. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here with you.
Absolutely. We're going to have a fun time today. Really, let's just dive right in. 2021 is upon us. When this podcast releases, it might already be the next year. And a lot of businesses have set goals. And hopefully those goals will align with everyone's vision. Kevin, you're an expert at tracking, creating systems, Excel spreadsheets, APIs with Gecko board. And I want to get into some of that. We don't have a lot of time. Usually we keep these to about 15 or 20 minutes. But for those listening, if you're wanting to do a better job at tracking, of course, you should be holding people accountable. But where are you tracking the things you're holding accountable? What are you holding accountable? And then how are you showing people that information? That is what this podcast episode is going to be all about. So maybe spend the first minute or so, Kev, talking about, obviously you're in Omaha raised. Talk about a little what you were doing prior to real estate. I know it's hard to keep the story short, but then what catapulted you into that operations role inside of our flagship team, Omaha's Elite Real Estate Group, prior to launching the coaching arm?
All right. Well, let's see if we can keep this under 60 seconds.
You have 4 seconds to
4 seconds. Okay. Right. No. So real quickly, really where a lot of my marketing and business career started was at Union Pacific Railroad, located there in Omaha. Worked for a small kind of division within Union Pacific, did a lot of internal marketing. So that was kind of where I began and where a lot of my education and background stems from, along with my local classes in college there. But basically where that evolved to is brought me into real estate. I came into a local father-daughter shop team and started in with them. And that's how I got into real estate in the first place. Lo and behold, about 18 months later is when you and I met, and things really started to rocket from there. Started off very small. I was actually the team photographer back then, was my very first position. And it was pretty quickly within that realm that we realized that this was obviously more than just photography we were talking about here. You had the grand vision of starting a real estate team, and things just like really kind of took off and went from there. So as things progressed, my duties did as well. So I then came on to be more in terms of the background of our company and with our administrative staff. And so marketing wise, it was all about how our listings looked to the public view and the public image, right? That was fully in my control. And then I became more of like the lead administrator of the team and so on and so forth, which then brought in a whole slew of other opportunities. And it basically just progressed all the way from there up to my operations manager role, from commissions to policies and procedures to marketing and graphic design still, and so on and so forth from there. But essentially boiling it all down to I'm just making sure that everything is running exactly how we want it to and how it completes our vision of where we are at that time.
Awesome. Well, so there's a lot there. Obviously that's 10 years of your life. I know our flagship team.
This amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. Our flagship team, Omaha's Elite Real Estate Group, was the fastest growing real estate team in history across all brokerage flags, across all states in this great United States of America. And Kevin was at the helm, running operations. Currently inside of the Elite Real Estate Systems arm, which is our coaching arm. Kevin has been the operating COO up until this year, and he is now in the CEO role. For those listening, everybody wants to do a better job at tracking. And Kevin, that's been your forte, your superpower, if you will. Let's just get right into that. So maybe let's go back to when you were that photographer for us, and we discovered that you had a skill set far beyond just photography, and your pictures were beautiful. He did drone, he did all sorts of cool stuff. But once we discovered you could do so much more on the back end and the operational role, which there's a lot of people listening that either they're in that role or they want to leverage and hire someone in that role. What were the first things that we started tracking, and how did tracking those things help give us more power in our decision-making as we scaled out the fastest growing real estate team in history?
Yeah. Well, as you mentioned at the top, we're at the end of 2020 here, going into 2021, and there's a lot of goal setting happening right now. Or if you're watching this, you've already set your goals. That was one thing that we were taking we were paying a lot of attention to, as far as tracking prospecting numbers was one of our first things that we did. We created this matrix that you just input all of the prospecting numbers into a basic Excel sheet. And what that did for us is that it tracked agent activity week in and week out. So we recorded how many calls they made, connects from those calls, appointments that they went on, contracts that they executed, how much even down to how much time they spent in prospecting. And so what we were able to do with that information is reverse engineer our goal setting. So as we know, we were able to boil all of that down to, you make X amount of calls, you can expect X result, right? Because you can backtrack this information, which is the beauty of analytics, really. So that was a really important one for us in the very beginning, and one that we obviously use to this day. It's been super impactful for our business of setting up the year correctly, setting that correct channel to send an agent down based on the goal that they set. It gave us the ability to ask them what their goal is, put it in our fancy little calculator, and then it spits out a weekly call number that they should strive to achieve, and that will put them on track to hit their goal. And then it's our jobs to then hold them accountable to that the next 52 weeks of the year, right? So that was a huge part of our analytics tracking when we first began.
As independent contractors, obviously, we all know everyone has their own goals. And it's so interesting that, I think that our society has programmed us out of college to think we need to go find a 6-figure job. 20 years ago, the number was 6 figures. Today, I still hear kids saying, yeah, I just want to make 100 grand. I don't know how to do it, but I'm gonna make 100 grand. We aren't going to ever tell anyone how much money to make. We have people that want to sell 3 houses a year to make 10 grand. We have other people that want to sell 300 houses a year to make X. It's not our job to do that. But what Kevin is explaining and what's so fascinating about the numbers is that we know analytically, based on data over now 10 years and $1 million in ad spend, the exact key performance indicators, the activities that an agent must do dependent upon their goals to get a certain result. So let's break that down. Do you have your numbers today, Kev? Do you remember, and I know we've gone through this a lot, we talk about it in the coaching, but do you remember as a whole where we're at in terms of how many calls to have a contact, how many contacts to have an appointment, how many appointments to get a closed sale? I mean, these are the types of numbers that we're looking at.
Yeah, exactly. So what we can expect, and based off the numbers that we've evaluated, is that we have about a 20% call to contact ratio. So every 100 calls that we place, we're talking to about 20 people, right? As far as appointments go, so we'll take that 20 people, we should be on average about being able to set about 5 appointments from those 20 people that we talk to, right? So there's another 20% ratio right there. Then of those appointments that we go on, we should have a really high closing ratio from there, because as we know, when you meet with somebody face to face, your closing ratio skyrockets into the 90th percentile, right? So we should, on average, if we're meeting with 5 people, probably be able to close about, close to 2 or 3 of those, I would say, for an executed sale. And so by being able to know those numbers, again, that lies in at the heart of being able to say, okay, great, you want X amount of sales by the end of the year. Let's backtrack that. And then that's how we got to our final number of, this is what you need to do per week. So say call that, 250 calls. The more that you do, the more likely you are going to be able to hit that goal. And obviously the less you do, the more that you're deviating away from that.
Yep. And I remember, we've broken it down to about 150 call attempts equals 1 executed contract in our market based on the people that our agents on average are calling. If an agent in Omaha wants to make 6 figures, we found that's about 36 transactions. So all we took was 36 transactions times, if they want to make 100 grand, times the 150 calls divided over 52 weeks. And I think it ends up being around 104 call attempts a week. And agents might go, oh, that's like I'm a glorified telemarketer. If you're using like a Mojo dialer, you can make $100 in an hour. And this is how our team was born. And this is how we saw the growth, is just simply teaching people that. Let's talk a little bit about how we tracked it. I just got done in our last podcast. I interviewed Andy Cuny, who's obviously good friends of ours and our success manager. So he would sit down with the agents to make sure we were getting the right numbers. What were those numbers? Take us through that. And then was there a place an agent could go to see the numbers? Because that's a big issue. I see success management where you're holding people accountable to something, but there's no vision of that. There's no dashboard that they can go to make sure that they can see where they're at for the year, if they're on track, if they're behind, if they're above.
Yeah, absolutely. So the brass tacks of what we would track were simply number of calls made, of those calls, contacts from those contacts, appointments that were set, executed contracts from those appointments. We also have kind of a a category that we call basically pending or floating transactions, where somebody's in the middle of a real estate negotiation, whether on a buyer or sell side, how many new listings that they took, and then finally how many hours that it took them to accomplish all of that. Which also is another important factor. The hours, if you remember, Jeff, is something we tacked on a little bit later. That wasn't one of our initial metrics to track. That's been largely helpful as well, just so that it really puts into perspective and gives us the ability to tell an agent about X amount of hours that they're going to need to accomplish their goals per week as well. And not only that, but just kind of I guess a side note to this that I think is really important is the fact that agents really actually do appreciate this. You know, this isn't just something that we do just for us as leaders to keep tabs on people, right? This is something that, you know, an agent values the fact that we have taken the time to track our own metrics to be able to set them on the correct course. And not only that, but most of the agents don't want to know how this is all created and done, right? They just kind of want to be set on a weekly goal and just have that one singular focus and keep that track of mind going on that goal, right? So anyway, that's really a huge reason as to why we've spent the time to track all of these numbers. Okay, so then from there, sorry, what was your follow-up after what it is that we track?
Yep. So we all listening, hopefully we have a success management process. And if we are getting these numbers, which a lot of people have struggled getting agents to go to websites to input the number, your agent probably won't. If you're not a real estate business and you have employees, it's a little bit easier to require them to input data every day. An independent contractor is going to have a hard time doing that, even with all of the motivation in the world. So we just have someone sit down with them every week to capture those numbers. That's our success manager. Once those numbers are captured, not just the key performance indicators, but also their overall sales volume in relation to their goals, how many listings they took, how many buyers they took. What do you do with that data to help motivate the agent? And how do you showcase data, like in the office or on a vision board? Or
it's a great question, because you know, we can spend all of this time tracking these numbers, right? But unfortunately, it can go and just to live and die in a spreadsheet, right? As we know, most agents aren't just jonesing to pull open spreadsheets and dive deep into these numbers, right? So for that, you need a more of a front end public solution for that. There's a couple of different products out there for it. You can go out and get like pre-made softwares that help you do this, where you just input numbers and it kind of has some ratios that it spits out for you. Companies similar to that would be like one called Sisu, for example. Another way to do it is if you're looking for a much more highly customizable route, there are other products out there, one of them being called Gecko Board, for example, where essentially it evaluates your spreadsheet. You tell it which of those cells that have that pertinent information on it that you want to have easily publicly displayed for education for not only you as a leader, but then of course the agent themselves, right? And so what it's able to do is it just gives you a nice clean dashboard of what the stats are that you want to have displayed. So that's just easy for you to digest those, visually see them, make decisions from it, see trends, whether positive or negative or neutral, and so on and so forth, so that that information can actually be applied and used, as opposed to, like I said, sometimes we spend all this time and effort, you know, and it took us a couple of years ourselves of failure of thinking that an agent is going to go pop into a spreadsheet, when in all actuality, that just wasn't really happening. So that's where we came up with different avenues of these KPI analytics on how to display them, how to use them, and, you know, just how to have them be more in an everyday life, as opposed to something that you just do once a week and you just kind of forget about it. And it's just something, you know, a box that you check of your to-do list.
I love it. One of the things that I thought was really innovative that I remember us implementing a couple of years back was we wouldn't just take 30. Let's say someone wants to make 6 figures in Omaha. That's 36 unit sales. Most people would just divide that by 12, and that's 3 sales a month. But we would look analytically, anecdotally at what their sales were the year previous and what the trends were the year previous. So if 22% of homes were the first quarter and 40% were the second and 36 were the third, we would literally take their goal of 36 and attribute those percentages. So an agent in January might only need to sell 2 houses, but in July might need to sell 4. So be cognizant of that as those out there listening set their goals for 2021. Make sure that you're not setting someone up for failure. And then I love your point. Gecko board, having a visual board that lives in the office on a flat screen that showcases where each agent's at not only just their KPIs, which is equally important using that peer pressure, but also their overall sales volume. Are they on track? Are they behind? Are they in front of that? And I know there's a lot of great tools out there. And like you mentioned, sisu.co is the website. We've used Sisu for several years and have a great experience with that. Something more customizable, like you said, Gecko boards with an API Gecko board that has the API that fills into Google Form. We've had a lot of success with that as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and another part too of the percentage tracking of how much business they did in that particular month also is what kind of business that they did as well. So another large part in our tracking is via lead source, of course, where that agent excels, right? We know that agents have different specialties. Some prefer cold calling and just drumming up their own business. Others specialize in the internet leads generated to them, others in their own particular sphere, right? And so by tracking that, we're able to hold them accountable to keeping focused on the areas of real estate that are going to provide them the most business, right? That's, again, something that Andy really jumps into as our success manager of saying, why are you doing this when your business is coming from here? Let's keep you focused on that. And that's going to realistically help you to achieve your goals.
Love it. For those out there that have found value in this, please give Kevin a shout out on iTunes. Give us a 5-star review for the Team Building Podcast. Also, we have a lot of exciting events coming up at Elite Real Estate Systems. We host the Team Building Workshop in Omaha. The first virtual workshop ever will be in January. And then we have a physical March workshop at the office. And then the May Team Building Summit, which is a huge event where we bring top broker owners, thought leaders, and keynotes from across the country, across a lot of different mediums. All that information, subscribe for the podcast, and free, content you can go out to grow with ERS.com. Kevin, you are awesome. I know a lot of people,
Jeffrey.
Everyone always jokes with us. They want a Kevin. So we have one in Elite Real Estate Systems. So for those that are interested, we would love to bring you into our world. I know there's all sorts of special offers right now that we're offering going into 2021. What's the best way for someone to get in contact with us if they want to look at partnering with Elite Real Estate Systems to help them implement all these systems going into next year?
Yeah, go to eliterealestatesystems.com. You can also check out any sample content if you want to just kind of get a good look and feel as in terms of the content that we deliver and how it's delivered. It's incredibly valuable. Head out to our website, eliterealestatesystems.com. You can also watch a kind of a how-to video. It's at the very top of our website. And at that point, if you want to learn any more information, you can schedule a demo call with our Director of Growth, Matt Peterson, and he'd be happy to walk you through all the little details and ins and outs of our program.
Perfect. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.